Alexi Curve. Today I will be demonstrating how to create an endeavouros image for the Raspberry Pi 4 on your MacBook Pro using the VirtualBox, and then once the image is created we'll write it to the micro SD card and then start the Raspberry Pi for the second phase. So the first phase basically involves downloading the ISO file for the endeavouros Artemis, and that we have already done. You can see that I have the endeavouros ISO image already downloaded. And then the second part is to create the file system image that will be writing to the micro SD card. So that is the part that we're going to work on now. So first part I'm going to do is I'm going to create a temporary file system for 8 gigabytes. Then I'm going to attach that as a loopback device. So I run these steps over here. So we can see that /dev/disk3 has been assigned. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a VMDK file that will point to the /dev/disk3. Okay, so now we have the two main files that we need to use over here. One is the VMDK file that points to this image file that we just created, which is basically empty, and the ISO file. So this is the live boot that we are going to use. We'll boot from this ISO file, and then we'll install the endeavouros on the image file so that we are prepared for the step 2. Okay, so this is just going to be the step 1 that we are going to perform. So to perform the step 1, we are going to require to create a new VM over here. So I will say new endeavouros. I will select Linux, Arch Linux 64, and I'll say continue. I will set 4 gigabytes. I think 3 gigabytes will also work, but I'm just going to set it to 4 gigabytes right now. And I'm not going to add a hard disk right now. I will add it in the settings. Now let's go to settings, go to storage. I will delete the SATA controller. I don't need that. And I will add first the ISO file. So I'll set add, and this is the ISO file over here. I'm selecting that and I say choose. So we added the ISO file by clicking on the first link over here, which adds the optical drive. Now we'll add the hard disk over here, the second plus button which is there. So add the hard disk. Again, I will click on add, and I will select the VMDK file that we just created, which is pointing to the img file. I say open, and I do choose. So we have the VMDK file created. Okay, so VMDK is the IDE primary device, and the ISO file is going to be the live CD. I say OK. And then we do the start. So it starts up a bit tiny over here. So I'm going to just go over here and say view screen, and set it to 300%. And we are going to boot using the default. So hit enter. The ISO file will boot, and then we can start the image creation process for the ARM. So even though we want to create an image for the ARM, we are running it on the x86-64 MacBook. I will start this terminal so that you can see the devices. You don't strictly need to do that, but I will just show that that we have the 8 GB hard disk that we had created. So you can see this is the 8 GB hard disk, and this is the ISO that we booted from, loop 0. The SDA is the hard disk that we want to install everything on. So I'll close this. Maybe I'll just hit exit. And we just have to wait for a few more seconds and the installer window will pop up over here. Okay, there we are. So you can see there are a lot of options over here. What we want is to install the endeavouros ARM image. Okay, so we are going to run this third option over here to start installing the endeavouros ARM installer. And we click on the start ARM installer. Just hit enter. We select the Raspberry Pi 4. We are going to select the ext4, and over here we are going to type /dev/sda that we just saw. Now when I type this, you will not see because it is going out of the screen, but believe me that I am typing /dev/sda, and then I hit enter. If you select 2 GB memory, then this saving to ZST file, that downloading of that file, it will only be partial. Okay, so make sure that you have at least 3 GB. In this case, I selected 4 GB of RAM for this VM. So once this finishes installing, this ZST file will be extracted and synced to this particular 8 GB image that we have created. Note that this is just the part 1. So once this image is created, we are going to detach that particular device so that the image that we created can be written to a micro SD card. And once we have the micro SD card created, we can insert that into the Raspberry Pi and boot the Raspberry Pi. So that is when the second part starts. Welcome app that will give you a chance to edit the mirrors, install the official edition or the community edition, and we can choose the username, password, and so on. And then it will wipe off the calamares that it used for doing this installation. So that will be part 2. Okay, so we'll get to that later. Let's complete this first part right now. It's still extracting. So the extraction is complete. Now it is syncing the files. And it is completed. Quit from here. Again, if you want to check the partitions that it just created on this image, we can check that. So you can see the first partition is 200 MB and the second partition is the 7.8 gigabytes ext4 partition. So the first step is now complete. I'm going to shut down this OS. And we can come back to this settings, storage. We are completed, so we don't need the VMDK file anymore. We can delete the ISO. We're done with all of this. I can just say OK, and I can just delete this off. Delete all files. Okay, so we're done with the virtual machine. And if I do, you can see the VMDK file is still present over here, but what we are interested in is this image file. Okay, this is the raw image file that we had wanted. We can write this raw image file directly onto the micro SD card now. So we can use Belena HL to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some cleanup. So for doing the cleanup, I have this list hdds, and this vmdk file. We can remove this now. So I will run the closemedium, remove it. It's no longer required. We have already deleted the VM. We can also list the DVDs, and since we had mounted this DVD, we can also close this DVD also. Okay, now we'll just burn this image to the micro SD card and then boot the Raspberry Pi.